Today's guest is podcast host, UN champion for women and girls, and former Miss South Africa. I'm so excited to chat with her today about how to build confidence, growing up in South Africa, and how you can take the lessons she's learned and apply it to your everyday life. Please welcome Shudufhadzo Musida. Shudu, welcome. We're so excited to have you here today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, if you want to give maybe just a little bit of background for our amazing audience to share a little bit about who you are and kind of how your career got started.
My name is Shudufhadzo, but people call me Shudu. I am from South Africa. And where do I start? I was born in a small village in South Africa, but I've always been such a big dreamer. I remember when I was 6 years old, I was watching First Wives Club, and I know I shouldn't have been watching it. But
at 6?
At 6 years old, I'd sit on my grandfather's floor and I was watching it. And I remember seeing Diane Keaton, may she rest in peace, Goldie Hawn, and Betty Midler. And they came out in their white outfits and said, "You don't own me." And I loved everything about that. And I just knew that I wanted to be in a city where women were not objects, where women could not be owned, where you could just be free to be anything that you wanted to be. I remember telling my mom that one day I'm going to move to New York, and that's how I throw my tantrums. But I've always been a person who manifests a lot. I've always dreamt and knew that when I dream something, it can actually become a reality. I then won Miss South Africa in 2020 after completing my undergrad. So I did my undergrad in philosophy, politics, and economics. And I've just always been a creative and someone who's drawn to anything that feels like you can create art and connect people with. And Miss South Africa was my first pageant. I couldn't even walk in heels, by the way, before I started Miss South Africa. So I remember being at home and like walking up and down, and my sister was like, "No, you can't look like you're uncomfortable. Fix your knees, stand up straight and just be confident about it." But for me, entering Miss South Africa was not necessarily because I thought I was like the prettiest girl in the room. It was because I just knew that there's something special about me, even if I don't believe it sometimes. I just don't know what it is. When I won Miss South Africa, I think that's the moment my life changed, because I always lived in the shadows, and finally, like, I was out in the open, you know? And it was interesting being out in the open, because you hide for so long that when you're finally seen, you have to actually put a mirror in front of yourself to see what people are seeing. And I had to put that mirror in front of myself. So I was like, okay, what do I want to do? I've got 365 days to do this, and Miss South Africa is one of the biggest pageants in the world. We've had, I think, 4 Miss Universes from Miss South Africa.
Wow.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest. And carrying that, but also being someone who's never been in the space, was just so overwhelming. But I was like, I have a purpose. My purpose is to make sure that everyone feels seen. So I wrote 2 children's books. I focused on mental health education specifically, especially at early childhood development level, because I had been bullied for 7 years when I was a child. And I remember just feeling like that's the reason I wanted to hide. Like, I need to hide. I just don't want, and if they don't see me, they won't hurt me, right? And I just imagined children feeling that way, and I didn't want that. So I wrote a children's book, and my first one, and it was a bestseller in 2 weeks, and parents were like, thank you for it. And children finally had the language to communicate what it is that they were feeling and to be exposed to what this was, because it's so important to have meaningful conversations. I mean, this is what we're trying to do here as well, but for children as well. And when I left Miss South Africa, that's when I decided that the fundamental of who I am as someone who grew up in the village is to be of service, to pay it forward, to make sure that I'm not the only single story that becomes a success. I started working with the UN, across the different UN agencies, from UN Women to UNFPA. And what I did was basically bring a mental health lens to the work that they do. So they do a lot of work to specifically UNFPA to make sure that women across the world have safe births, they have access to sexual and reproductive health services, they are empowered, they're educated, but they also understand that they have bodily autonomy, which is something that was never really communicated, especially in an African perspective, you know. And culturally, you know, like, women are raised to feel like they are supposed to be submissive or second to men. And
even still today,
I think, like, it's better, but across many cultures, I mean, it feels, I'm 29 years old and I still get asked why I'm not married. And
Same.
it's interesting to me, because I'm like, okay, that makes no sense. Like, in the world that we're living in right now, marriage is the last thing on my mind, honestly. Like, it really is. I want to be in partnerships, you know, both in business and in a romantic sense. But the fact that I'm still being asked that, the fact that when I post a certain picture, like even in somewhere, I'm sexualized, you know, like it's things like that that make you realize that we still have a long way to go. And I think you and I were talking about it before. There's certain standards that women are held to that men are not held to. Obviously, that's at a bigger level in terms of like our everyday lives. But then imagine at a point where it starts affecting their health. So that was the focus. When it starts affecting their health, you're looking at female genital mutilation across the world. There's about 27 million girls who are expected to go through that. And when you listen to all those things, you realize that now more than ever, we should be advocating for other women, investment in women. And this is not just in health, you know, this is like across the board in workplaces. I don't have the most popular conversations sometimes, or even bring the most popular conversations to the forefront, but they're necessary conversations, and that's what I've been able to do. And since moving to New York, I'm a master's student as well. So I'm doing my master's at Columbia University, and I am focusing on international finance and economic policy with a minor in innovation, to find how we design solutions, but also direct investments, specifically for me, to Africa, making sure that African people are active participants of the change that they want to see, to women, making sure that, you know, we don't just say gender equity, we don't just say 50-50 representation in the workplace, but it's actual changing cultures as well within the workplace, and that actually changes things across the board. So, yeah.
No, that's amazing. And thank you for that. Thank you so much for that overview. Being Miss South Africa, can you tell us a little bit more about how you found the confidence to obviously succeed in such an incredible way? Like, what was that like?
I cried every day.
Really?
I was not confident. I remember, so the reason I even entered Miss South Africa is because my friend and I made a bet.
No.
So at the time, so the reason I thought I couldn't enter Miss South Africa, one, was because I couldn't walk in heels. I have the worst stage fright, or I had the worst stage fright at the time. But like, I would see the question and answer portion, you know, like where they asked a question and I was like, I'm going to freeze. Because in high school, my English teacher would ask me questions, or I'd have to deliver a speech. I'd be so prepared, I'd be so excited for it, and then I stand in front of the class and I start itching, like sweating, and like almost like close to tears, to the point where my teacher, Mrs. Hughes, would be like, it's okay. And she would always just give me like a 65% because she knew that I tried, but she couldn't do more than that, you know, because it's also about the delivery. So the thought of entering a pageant was just like, no ways. And the last time I'd actually watched a Miss South Africa pageant was 2010. I didn't watch it years after that because it just felt like it didn't represent someone who looked like me. You know, I was bad with my hair. I was never the girliest girl you'd ever lay your eyes on. You know, I liked playing with the boys. I liked everything, but I liked watching wrestling. How I used to dream was watching wrestling. Like that's
like WWE.
Yeah, like literally live from Madison Square Garden. I'm like, I want to go there. Shawn Michaels. Goodness, I still have the his entry song on my phone. Like, I have the Undertaker song, D-Generation X. The theme song is on my phone. And sometimes when I just need to feel good, I just listen to that, because
so
that was me. That is my childhood. And pageant was dresses. Pageant was walking in heels. Pageant was like long hair. And if you weren't born with long hair, you get a weave. Like, it was things like that that I just felt like I could never do, because when I did get a wig or a weave, I just couldn't do it. Like, it would just look like a mess, you know. And then I just tried like hiding it. And then I have to go to like my best friend, who's like opposite to me. She's so girly. Her name is Lidi. And she would like have to like fix everything for me. So my friend... in 2019, we had the first Miss Universe from South Africa. Her name is Zozi, and she won Miss Universe with short hair. And she was also very intelligent, and she was just different. And then my friend said, you see, you can also do it too. But mind you, I had not watched a pageant in 10 years or something. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll do it. She's like, you better enter. And then I was like, okay, fine. She calls me Abby. Like, Abby, you better enter. And I was like, okay, fine. And entries started coming around, and it was COVID. And how you'd enter this time around is actually recording a video and posting it on social media. I'm like, oh my God. Why?
That's scary.
And my thing is, I keep my word. I always keep my word. I'm like, okay, I made a promise. And you know what? People like probably won't see it. It's fine. Like, no one knows who I am. So I remember watching the different videos that the different women who were entering were posting. and it'd be like a minute, 30 seconds, 2 minutes. They had so much to say about themselves. And the worst question you could ask me is, tell me about yourself. That's the worst question you could ask me. And I just remember like not knowing what to do. My hair wasn't done. I was like, okay, fine, I'll just put on a head wrap or something. Like very lazy, put on my mom's shirt so I could look presentable. And I recorded the video. I think it was like 43 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And in my caption, I expected to fail forward, because for me, I didn't think I'd make it past that point. But I'm doing this because I'm learning that in life, you always have to have the courage to go after the things that you want. In life, if you're scared of failure, you'll actually never get anywhere. So you need to do the things that scare you the most. So in my caption, like I mentioned that, and I got a call saying you're in the top 35. I was like, oh my goodness, you know. And at the time, we went into lockdown on the 27th of March, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I had a big afro, but the thought of managing the afro on my own without a hair salon killed me. I went and I shaved it off, like I had no hair. And that was just pure laziness, to be fair. But I went to get my headshots done at the Miss South Africa organization, and they were like, is this your look? I'm like, yeah, like, let's go. So I entered Miss South Africa, bald, no hair, nothing. And as soon as it was announced, I didn't know how people would like react, but then I was like, okay, cool, let's be smart about this. You don't actually think you're going to win Miss South Africa, so let's use it to actually get your name out there, get your work out there. You're a triple major graduate. This is probably the best way to get into into different rooms, to get networks that you would have never imagined for yourself, but also to do something that you're passionate about, which is paying it forward to the community. So I went to different communities, and we were helping with food insecurity in different like underprivileged communities. My mom was so supportive. She was with me all the time, and we were donating stationery, going to places where they didn't even have like blankets or anything like that. So I just used it as an opportunity to do things that I could not afford before. But now that I've got this platform, I can actually get donors. I can get people to give money for me to give it forward to different people. But during that process, honestly, I didn't believe in myself to win the pageant. And then it was top 10 and I won the public vote. People thought I could be their next Miss South Africa. This curvy, bald-headed girl could be their Miss South Africa. I'm like, oh. But every single night in the hotel was just ugly conversations with myself. Like I would cry. I would, like go through moments of feeling like I'm not good enough. And I remember talking to my uncle, and then he said to me, dude, if you believe the crown is yours, then it's yours. Because we can't believe it for you. I can tell you that you're going to be Miss South Africa. Clearly the public thinks you're going to be Miss South Africa. They spent their hard-earned money to vote for you to be their Miss South Africa. You're their public favorite. And I think it was the night before rehearsals. Mind you, I'd been crying all along. And at the time, I was just going through a medical issue as well. So I was gaining weight too. So I just felt like this is just horrible. Like everyone else just looks amazing. And I just look like this. And then he said to me, no one can believe in you for you, unfortunately. So unless you believe it, you're not going to have it. So I left my hotel room that night and I was like, I'm going to be Miss South Africa. I still have the video on my phone. I'm going to be Miss South Africa. I'm going to rehearsals. I'm like, I can do this. I can do this. Because it was the conversations that I needed to start having with myself, that I needed to reframe everything that was going on in my head. So rehearsals come in, and we didn't have to answer the questions that the judges were asking us on like rehearsal night. This is just to make sure that you know what to do. And they asked me a question. I was like, a winner must always be prepared. So I answered the question. And everyone was shocked because we were told we didn't have to answer any question. The night of, I remember my dress wasn't finished. Everyone's dresses were finished. My dress wasn't finished. No one knows that it wasn't finished. Actually, this is the first time they're probably going to hear of it. But I remember walking, and we had to introduce ourselves. And as I was introducing myself, I stuttered, like I was nervous. You could hear that I was nervous. My voice was like shaking. I was trembling. But as soon as it happened, I realized something about failure, especially like when you're speaking in front of people. It's a second. It's a second. You mess up for a second and you get back up immediately, and it just becomes that. Like it's literally just a second. And I introduced myself, who I am, where I'm from, and then walked off stage. I was like, okay, I didn't fall. The heels were fine. I'm still standing. Okay, round 1, done. And then we did the swimwear section, which was something that I was really insecure about because, like, I'm curvy, and everyone else is like not curvy like me. I'm the first curvy girl to actually do like enter a Miss South Africa pageant and make it this far. I have no hair, so it's not like I can do anything, you know, with my hair. I love that for you guys actually, but I couldn't even do that, you know, flip. Yeah. A little flip. It felt like I was just bare. And I remember walking back and standing on stage, and then they had to announce the top 5. So they announced the first 4. I call them girls because they're my girls, but like they announced the first 4 women. And with the 5th one, I was like, all of these women on the stage are like incredible. I think it's going to be that one. It's fine. So I looked up and I was like, God, it's okay. Because I sometimes think God is like my dad. So I was like, God, it's okay. I'll be fine. If this is not mine, it's fine. It's fine. And I stood there and I accepted the fact that it's not mine. And they said my name. I was like, me? And then I walked and I was like, okay, cool. We've made it to the top 5. I just want to say my final statement. That's what I kept on saying to myself. I don't expect to, and I just want to say my final statement. So my final statement is that 1 in 3 people are expected to suffer from mental illnesses in their entire lifetime. Because during COVID, we're so focused on like physical recovery, economic recovery, and we're forgetting the mind. People lost family members. People lost everything. And the only thing we're focusing on is just, you know, the outside looking things that make them look like they're fine. So I just wanted to speak on the importance of mental health on a stage where millions of South Africans were watching. So I said my final statement. Next thing, I'm in the top 3. And then the next thing, they announced my name as Miss South Africa, which was the craziest thing because it felt like someone did this. Like, it was like a light switch. The next day, all the newspapers in South Africa, the headlines were mental health.
Really?
Yes, I won, but like...
That was the lesson.
That was the lesson. Like, literally, it was my name and mental health, Miss South Africa, mental health, Miss South Africa, mental health.
Well, congratulations. I mean, hopefully you don't cry anymore and you have your confidence back and things are going a little bit better. But the fact that you overcame that is such a win. And I'm so happy that happened to you. During COVID, especially, it was such a difficult time. And the thing that I always go back to is like, community is everything. Mm-hmm. And when we lost that during COVID, I'm noticing in my work that I'm doing now and with podcasting is we're also trying to take it to live events because I think post-COVID, everything is so, you know, digital and people are craving that in-person community again more than ever. So I think the fact that you like shined a light on mental health, especially during COVID, was so important.
So fun fact, when I was doing the Miss South Africa pageant and even after I won, I was pursuing my postgrad. So I would be like, I had no sleep. I just needed to complete it. And I remember after winning Miss South Africa, I said to my therapist, I'm tired. The schedule is crazy and I've been trying. I wrote a 50-page thesis during that whole process. I'm like, I'm tired. But I only had like 2 essays to submit after that. And I just needed to do 1 presentation. And during that time, my professors told me to drop out because this is unsustainable. Like, how are you expecting to do all of this at once? And I was like, bro, I actually don't have the luxury of dropping out, you know, because I was on a scholarship. And my therapist said, you don't give up on the things you prayed for. She's like, I don't care how you do it.
Yeah.
You are going to do it. So after I won Miss South Africa, I would do all of that, 10 p.m., come back home and write my essays. And in December, I completed my postgrad. So I was very happy that I did that because education is such a big part of who I am. And post Miss South Africa, I look back at some of the decisions that I made, which then informed the rest of my life. So one of the things I actually tried to do was to revamp the education curriculum in South Africa to include mental health education for early childhood, development curriculums. So I worked on that. Unfortunately, it didn't happen because things take time in government. But then it made me realize the power of actually making structural changes. So post Miss South Africa, I was then the first regional champion of the United Nations Population Fund, for Eastern Southern Africa. So I'd be traveling across Eastern Southern Africa, getting the different stories there, understanding more than just the reports that you read. These are actual people who live on the ground, who go through like FGM, who go through not actually being able to give birth safely, who don't even have access to midwives, who don't even have access to health services. These were the realities on the ground, and I did that for about a year. And what it helped me realize is that stories shape reality, stories shape policy, stories shape economies. So that's when I started working with different organizations around the world where the work that they do is well-intentioned, but is it actually making the impact that it actually needs to make? So I started advising for some organizations, started mentoring. After like a while of like doing that, I think it was like a year and a half, I was like, I need a seat at the table to actually make the structural changes. I've gathered the information, I have the ideas, but now it's time to execute.
What was the lay of the land like? Because I feel as if in a lot of these places, like you hear a lot of like buzzwords and fluff around like these different things that are happening. But what did you feel like actually made like the biggest difference to women's lives? And like, what do you wish happened more?
I think the thing that makes the biggest difference in women's lives is listening to them.
Yeah.
Asking them what they need, not assuming what they need. Finding out like ways to invest in what they're already doing, because most of the time when you go into communities, there are people who are trying.
Yeah.
Women are the backbone of communities, so they are trying to make sure that their children get education. Whether or not they have the education or not doesn't matter. They just want to make sure that their children get the education. There was this one woman in particular that I met in Kenya, and she had undergone FGM, and she said, not with my child.
Wow.
So she literally started an organization where she helped so many women and children in her community because her inspiration was her child never going through that. So women, if you listen to them, if you give them the resources, if you invest in them, they're actually doing the work on the ground. If you look at the health system currently, and this is not just in Africa but across the world, there isn't enough research around women or investment into women for them to actually sit at the table and say, okay, cool, we are designing something for women. We are the women who you should be listening to. But how many times do you find that decisions are made about women, but not by women?
All the time, and in the US especially.
Yeah, exactly. So it's that. Like, I think what I found in those spaces is that they're not helpless. They just need investment. They just need people to listen to them. They just need a seat at the table to actually tell you what they need. And I think that was the key thing that I loved about working with the UNFPA, is the fact that we would go there and actually give them a chance to speak. If the nearest clinic is 40 kilometers away, how do you expect a woman who has gone in labor to actually get there? In places where there's been conflict or wars, like, what are do women actually have the necessary things that they need? And the interesting thing is, at school I actually wrote a paper around how women and children are the ones that suffer the most during conflicts and wars. So sometimes women specifically are used as weapons. So if you want to hurt a community, I think it was in the DRC, you just have to assault and abuse women to make people bend to your will. And the fact that that's how women are viewed, and this is not just in war and conflict-stricken areas, this is just in reality, where women are like, they're not seen as people that have something to add, but women are the backbone of communities. When you think about places that are underprivileged, the only way they survive without resources is because of women. Women always make a plan. So when you give them the resources, you can only imagine what they can do. So I think the fundamental thing that I learned over and above the investments is listen to women.
And that's such an important lesson. Such an important lesson. Almost all of my girlfriends, like, they have mental health or physical health things that just feel like they're not being diagnosed correctly.
Yeah.
And it's a big problem. And it's like, with all of this research, I think women's health often takes a backseat. Yeah. So it's a shame.
How many stories are you seeing right now on social media around women who are only being diagnosed with ADHD later in life? So many.
Yeah.
How many stories of endometriosis, like women only finding out now that the reason why they've been suffering for so long is because no one picked it up. I think there's like I struggle with acronyms and abbreviations, but I think it's PCOS.
Yeah, PCOS.
Yeah, women are only finding out later in life.
Yeah.
And it's things like that make you realize it's not that, and this is happening in the West, by the way.
Absolutely.
And this is happening in the US, this is happening in Europe. It doesn't matter where, but like, the foundational thing is, most of these systems were not created with women in mind.
No. In your incredible experience going from South Africa to also like living in the US, I think it's really interesting, and I think people are inherently just way more interesting when they have multiple cultures that they've been like deeply ingrained in. What are some things that you're noticing are differences between South Africa and then just culturally in the US?
Africans, and not just Africans, I think the Asian continent too. So the African continent, the Asian continent as well. We are raised to know a lot about the West. So we know about who we are, our communities, but then the West is not raised to know enough about us. So it's very hard for us to be in dialogue. And I think the beautiful part about Mindful Mondays, which everything that I was mentioning to you before about like listening to women and all of that, is a big part of why I started the podcast, because that's how we get to have these conversations like the one we're having now. But in these conversations, sometimes when I'm having the conversation and I have a friend of mine listen to it, right? If they're American, but if they're American and like Indian or something, then they understand better. But what I also noticed in class is I had this project where I was presenting on the Angola War. So it was the class is called Inside the Situation Room. And at some point in that class, I was expressing different relations between Africa and different countries, right? And this one student lost it because she thought I was wrong. But what I found was you're not teaching students enough about the global south for us to be in dialogue. You're not, because for them it's almost like I'm wrong because they've only been told one perspective. The duality of African people, Asian people is that like we know we matter, but for us to actually get anywhere in life, we need to know about the West. We need to know what America's doing. I need to know who your president is. Many people don't even know who the South African president is. But it's things like that where Africans and Asian people, or the Asian population on the Asian continent, we are forced to know so much about America. We're forced to know so much about the Europe continent. But when I came here, I found that no one knows enough about us for me to be in dialogue about them. Like only a few people who've actually gone to a Cape Town will then know. You know, if you've been to Cape Town, then you know about the Springboks, you know. Like I have a friend from Belgium and he's got a Springboks jersey. That's the national rugby team in South Africa. But those are the things we connect on. We can connect over like a Babylon store in red wine. So every time I get a Babylon store in red wine or he has one, I go over to his place, he comes over to my place and we enjoy it together. But South Africa has the best wines, in my opinion, in the world. Maybe the French may disagree, but it's things like that I found that for us to bridge that gap would mean actually having a two-way conversation. The same way you asking me all these questions now, having more and more people interested in that. Knowing that, okay, international relations looks very different in the US than it does in South Africa. Knowing that politics looks very different. You know, one thing South Africans don't play about is freedom of speech. And I was on a panel and they were speaking about the state of the US right now. And it's scary. It's really, really scary, obviously, for me as a South African, because we don't play around our freedom of speech because it was hard-earned freedom by leaders and people like Nelson Mandela. So we know fundamentally we cannot mess with democracy. We cannot. And when I was on that panel, I said it's important that Americans also educate themselves about what happens when freedom of speech is infringed upon. It's not just my problem. It's not just a black person problem. It's all of our problems. Because if you don't realize how infringement of freedom of speech, democracy being shaken, people living in fear, what it can lead to, and you haven't done enough research about other parts of the world, you will not realize how much trouble you're in. Looking at different parts of the world, learning about different parts of the world, it makes us more informed about the kind of world that we want to see, because sometimes we are so siloed, you know, like different continents, like on the map, like there's different continents. But the truth is we're one global community. Whatever happens in the US affects us in South Africa. And maybe that's why we need to learn a lot about you guys. But whatever happens in Africa doesn't really affect you much, but it doesn't affect you economically. But as time goes, you'll realize how integrated we are and how when we learn from one another, we can make better decisions.
I completely agree. I think that was extremely well said and extremely accurate. Like, I'm sure you felt like this too, but even growing up in Canada, like when I went through school there, it was, we have to learn about the US. We, get a lot of our programs and TV and different things like from the US, and we, in the same way that you watch shows in the US, so did we.
There's a lot of genres that do originate from different parts of the world, but they're only popularized or they're as big as they are, like here in the US. I mean, hip hop is from here, but like if you see how it's evolved and has stood the test of time, it's admirable to see how people can make careers out of being content creators, influencers. They can make careers out of being photographers, like make millions of dollars, literally from their passions. In many places around the world, it's very difficult to make a living out of your passions. I was having a conversation yesterday where content creators in South Africa right now, they give world-class content. They get the best cameras, they hire the makeup artists. You could swear you're looking at an ad, but what they get paid is not even a fraction of like what a content creator in the US would get paid. America it's a place where you can literally make a career out of anything.
It's so true.
You get like true. The American dream is the freedom to make a career out of anything. If you think you're talented at something, you can literally make a career out of anything. Vegas, for example, let's say you've got like crazy talents. You can literally become a millionaire off of something you think you're good at and convince people that you're good at it. In South Africa, that's not the case. There are many musicians and many actors right now who are incredible, but actors can barely get by, most of them. But they are making world-class television, but they just don't have the access, or the market hasn't fully evolved to the point where it has right now. Entertainment here in the US is one of the backbones of the economy.
Yes.
And there is no America without the entertainment industry. But same thing in South Africa, without the entertainment industry, like the economy can survive, but we wouldn't survive. The social sector wouldn't survive. There's a lot of social capital in it, but not necessarily economic capital. So for me, what I found was privilege plays a big role in one's life. And in how I was being strategic is I found myself in different rooms in the Middle East, in Europe, in the US. And you find that what I do, a lot of people in the US could monetize off of it, but because I'm from South Africa, it was different. And I didn't like that. I didn't like that. I was giving my IP out that was worth so much money. But because we were never taught to commercialize the same way I'm saying you guys, but you're not American.
No, but I get it. Yeah.
But you get me?
Yeah,
like,
I get
the
it.
same way that Americans were taught to commercialize any talent that they have, you know? But the issue is like bridging the gap between the ideas and the economy, like meeting the ideas at the level that it should. So I think my moment was, obviously I'd done the pageantry and I came to New York in 2022. My mentor was here. She said to me, for what you want to do, which is basically sit in rooms and find solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world, be the connector that you want to be, you're going to need a master's. I've set up an appointment for you here to go look at it and meet one of the professors there who's a good friend of mine and see if you like it. So that was Columbia. So, and funny story about Columbia is it was the first US university that I looked at when I was 18. But the only reason I didn't apply was because how would I make it happen? You know, like it was not a thing for me back then. But I applied, but I didn't know that I'd get in, and I finally got my acceptance letter. But the thing that made me want to do it is because an Ivy League university or institution gives you the credibility that you need to say that I charge this price. And mind you, I could have easily charged whatever I wanted to then, but a lot of people were just like, you a black girl from South Africa want to charge me that price? But now, because of the credibility that the institution will give me, something that the West can understand, that was my big push to say that, like, you know, not that I've hit the ceiling, but I want more out of life. I want to be able to sit in rooms not only in South Africa but around the world. And to be fair, I feel like Africans are also very guilty of only celebrating talent only once it's made it big in the US. And that's also like a big thing where if we could win in our own communities, I think a lot more people would just stay at home.
I think what was really interesting to me and what we were talking about earlier was the fact that imposter syndrome is something that seems to be a little bit more, you know, focused on women. You don't hear a lot of men talking about this. You don't see men being defined as, oh, they have imposter syndrome.
I actually had a conversation about this on my podcast, and I was sitting with an incredible woman. Her name is Nozipho Shabalala, and she's incredible because she's worked across different spaces. So she's a moderator and a conversation strategist for some of the biggest organizations in the world. So I was sitting on Instagram one day and I found a clip of her speaking, saying, I don't have imposter syndrome. I don't think imposter syndrome is something that I prescribe to. I don't even think it's real, in the sense that if you look at the origin of imposter syndrome and the label being coined, it was at the same time that women were entering the workplace. She's like, I have confidence wobbles. And sometimes it's because I'm not prepared. And if I'm not prepared, I will prepare accordingly and find myself in a better positioning, right? And she said, the issue is, it's not that it's not real per se, because it does exist under like psychology. It's the fact that it's only attributed to women, and that's where the problem lies. And a lot of women are given labels where we feel like we don't belong in spaces because of the labels that we're given. And unfortunately, because if you call someone something, it's like calling a child dumb when they're young.
Yep.
You call them dumb enough times, they start assuming the label of that. But the labels that you give, you must be careful like what you say, especially to children, but more so to women. What I've found, especially in my work, is that the way we speak to ourselves and the way we allow others to speak to us makes the biggest difference. Why is it that I'm the one that's asked whether or not I have imposter syndrome or how I deal with imposter syndrome, but my male counterpart is not? And the thing is, men deal with imposter syndrome too. They just don't have to deal with being asked about it. So they find themselves noticing that I'm having a confidence wobble, noticing that, okay, if I feel like this is how I can deal with it. But women, it's just all we asked. We're expected to have imposter syndrome. One of my first classes at Columbia, I was sitting there and I just felt like I didn't belong there.
Really?
Yeah, and the only reason I felt like I didn't belong there was not because I didn't belong there. You know, how I see myself actually matters a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, I come from South Africa. Yes, I was born in a small village, but that doesn't define me. It actually gives me a beautiful duality to actually have conversations and see the world in a different way. But in that class specifically, I thought that I'm having imposter syndrome. You know, I'm at this Ivy League institution and I'm from South Africa. And you know that the South African education system, for me, it had more substance, to be fair.
Yeah.
Because again, it presents that duality of being African, but also having to learn about the broader perspectives of the West. And when I went home, I had to have a conversation with myself. You're going to be here for 2 years. If you feel like this every single day, this is not going to work. If you're not speaking in class, your tuition is very expensive. You actually have to say something, you know. So I sat down with myself and I realized that I wasn't prepared for the class because I didn't do my readings. I wasn't prepared for the class because I didn't sit down and actually study the material. So everything that they were speaking about is actually me not being adequately prepared. So what I started doing was started preparing the material so I could speak confidently in class. So I prepared the material, but I still couldn't speak in class because I wondered if what I had to say mattered. Because the thing about Americans that I admire about you guys is you know how to speak confidently even when you're wrong.
Wait, let's talk. First of all, I'm Canadian, but yeah.
Canadian. Okay.
But no, this is an American trait.
It
and
is.
I noticed it when I first moved to the US as well. And I started working in VC world, like where it was like all like venture capital. And I was like, these people are raising millions of dollars and they don't even know if their product is even going to be good. Like, and trust me, I lived through it. Like there were some things that were not good.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, this is the next thing. You're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I found it in class, and I love how you like hold it.
Yeah.
I'm Canadian. Don't put me in this box.
Don't put me in the US box.
But like, I found it interesting being in that class because at first you think they're right to a point where like, oh, they're also this, they're also that, right? And then you're like, wait. That actually didn't make any sense. But I don't want to lie, the education that I'm getting is not only just like, you know, the academic side, but it's also learning the American way of believing in yourself to a point where it's delusional. And I love it. Like they speak in class and I just, like now I just find myself chuckling, you know, because I'm just like, I love this so much. But it was that thing where I'm like, okay, they sound right, but it doesn't mean that they are right. The only difference between them and me is the fact that I don't sound confident or I don't feel confident. So I better start faking it until I make it. If that's one thing I'm going to learn from this country, it's that. Being so confident and believing in yourself so much that even if you're wrong, you don't mind being wrong because you sound right? And I went back home and I was like, dude, this tuition is expensive. New York is expensive. You better start saying something. So I started speaking in class. And the more I started speaking, the more I realized that there's a certain character building that's happening here where I grew up in a South African tribe where we're very humble, you know, we speak, but like we really think about what we're saying, you know, like it's a very academic community. But I had to realize that whatever I say matters, and if I'm wrong, it's an opportunity to learn, right? So I started speaking up more and more, and I realized that the issue was not imposter syndrome. It was just the fact that I didn't have the confidence or the preparation to speak confidently about what I wanted to say. And that's when you start realizing that let's stop assuming certain labels, like even if you are dealing with a mental health issue, it is a sickness on its own. It does not define you. And a sickness accordingly needs to, be dealt with, needs to be healed, needs to be given medication, needs to be, nurtured is not the right word, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But like, it needs to be treated as a sickness separate from you. Yes, it is affecting you, but like any sickness, when you've got the flu, you don't say I'm flu.
Mm-hmm.
How people say I've got imposter syndrome, like it's almost like it's a thing that you live with and it doesn't go anywhere. No, like you can actually rise above that. So for me, it was like, okay, I don't, more than anything, more than just the education. I mean, Columbia is an incredible university, but more than just the education, I really want to learn the delusion of Americans.
And the networking will be good.
And then the networking, it depends. I feel like networking for me is such an interesting thing, because what I find is it depends on the kind of room, depends on who you know in the room. Like sometimes you go in a room and you don't even get the attention because the social currency is who you know. What's your name? What do you do? That's actually why I don't like LA. But like, it's what do you do? It's like most of the time I get to connect with some of the best people if they've heard me speak, if they know me from somewhere. But if I'm just going there as a guest, networking isn't what it used to be. It's more like you're saying, it's the personal connections that you build outside of wanting something from people. It's being in a space where people invest in people. That's the other thing. So being someone that someone would want to invest in, being someone who, when I leave this room, I can say, you know what, Jade is a nice person. Do you know someone who's doing this? And then I say your name. That's the new currency. It's people are so inundated with so many things that them remembering a name, if you're not someone that they think they should know, is very difficult. So what I found about networking, especially in the US, is finding your method of networking.
But what lessons from growing up in South Africa do you think the West could kind of learn? So what about community, and what about your experience growing up in South Africa specifically, would you say is something that you wish was happening here more in the US? In the same way that in the US, what we're saying was good is the blind confidence.
Ubuntu. So there's a South African phrase is called Ubuntu. I think it's funny, Tom Cruise actually spoke about it on stage. I was like,
really?
Okay, I'm glad you know that. But like, South Africans are incredibly warm and hospitable, and we have this thing where you respect anyone by virtue of just them being human. So you being human is enough for me to just respect you. You being a living thing is enough for me to respect you. It's enough for me to respect the trees. It's enough for me to respect things that you care about, like what I struggled with initially in the US is how, and I get it, like it's fast paced, it's how sometimes it can be so cold because everyone is just rushing to the next thing. Everyone is just irritable when you ask a question, and it's not everyone. I'm using everyone very loosely, by the way, but it's when I'm nice and I'm kind, it's not that I'm weak. It's just that I respect you and I feel like you deserve that. When I give you your moment to shine, is not that I think I shouldn't be in front. I can lead from the back and from the front too. And that's what Ubuntu is also about. If you need something and I can help you, it doesn't have to be a tit for tat, And when I got here, like I remember calling room service. And every time when I call reception or room service at a hotel in the US, it's like, I'll say, hi, how are you? Right? Can I help you?
Yep.
You get to a restaurant. Hi, how are you? What can I do for you today? Like things like that. I struggled with them because I'm like, and the thing is I was stubborn about it. Until you tell me how you are, there's no need for me to be like,
I'm not going to continue my sentence.
Exactly.
You're like, I'm waiting for the answer.
How can I help you? Sorry, how are you? I would literally have to do that because that's something that was ingrained in me, I grew up in a place where you can go to someone's house when I was younger though, but like I could go to someone's house and eat like I live with them, like that's my family. Like that's the thing. And South Africans like to dance, they like to celebrate because we have so much to celebrate, because we've lost so much, like over the last 21 years Obviously, it's been amazing to rebuild South Africa into what it is. But South Africans are so full of love. And I'm not saying Americans are not, but it's in the little things. It's in the little things.
Something that always stuck with me here too, similar to your point, if you say thank you to someone, then they say, I was always raised to say, like, you're like, when someone says thank you, say, oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Like, always, like, that was the thing. But then when I moved here, I was like, oh, people don't acknowledge the thank you.
Yeah.
Like, it's different. They don't let it. They just keep it moving.
Don't you think it's like basic like manners though? Like,
yeah. Okay, well, to wrap up, I'm going to ask a few faster, more like rapid fire questions. And again, feel free to answer in like a sentence or a word or kind of just whatever flows and kind of comes to your mind. What is your best preparation tip before going on stage or filming a podcast?
To prepare, but not to over prepare.
Good one. Okay, best tip for wearing an outfit with confidence.
Be comfortable. Like, just be comfortable, and also just listen to a song that makes you feel like you're the baddest in whatever room you're walking into.
I love it. Who's your dream podcast guest?
Viola Davis.
Oh, that's a good one. Do you have a mantra for life?
Be kind.
And then the last question, what is the best advice you have received?
Believe in yourself without waiting for other people to do it for you.
That's amazing. Okay. And where can people find you on social?
They can find me on at Mindful Mondays Pod, which is on Instagram. My own personal page is my name, Shudufhadzo Musida, which is also on Instagram. They can find me on TikTok at Shudu Musida, and LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn girl now.
Nice. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This was amazing, and I really appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. I loved it.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow us on socials at Bird's Eye Pod and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We launch new episodes every single week.